Good morning. So just before I say what I've written down here on this piece of paper, you know, we say the uniform affirmation every Sunday, and it struck me the second line of the uniform affirmation, the quest for truth, its sacrament. How important is that right now? Just unbelievable. My wife Trudy and I had a number of reasons for committing our time, talents, and treasure to the UU Church, and they've changed over the decades. When we were raising our two daughters 40 years ago, we became members of the UU Church in Arlington, Virginia, in order to provide Elsa and Jolie with a grounding in religious education so they could make decisions as they matured about the course of their spiritual lives. We joined other parents to lead RE classes on Sunday mornings, and Trudy served on the RE council there at the church. Our commitment turned out to be more successful than we originally envisioned, in that our younger daughter has found her life's calling as a UU minister, currently in Sharon, Massachusetts. You know, who knew? As the years went by, we continued to support the church as we found there a community of like-minded folks that broadened our lives. A few examples: Trudy co-produced a beloved winter solstice celebration every year with music, dancing, storytelling, and food, and founded an intergenerational theater group called Chalice Theater that presented a musical at the church annually with a cast drawn largely from the congregation. I joined other church members in working on projects with Habitat for Humanity, despite my very limited carpenter skills, and became politically active, demonstrating against the war, working on letter writing campaigns, founding the Green Sanctuary there at the church, and joining one of the ministers who led a group that met with our U.S. Senator to support funding to mitigate global warming. Unfortunately, you can see how well that worked out. Becoming involved with a group of socially and artistically committed people became a significant reason for our financial support. It could be said that we found our tribe at the UU Church. Moving to the North Shore about 15 years ago, we settled in Swampscott and were delighted to find UU-CGL offered a vital music program, at the time under the leadership of Francie Fitch. I would say currently that the major reason we pledge annually to UU-CGL is this strong support of the music component of the Sunday service. In Kenneth and in David, we are blessed with extraordinarily talented musicians who provide us with direction for the choir and musical performances week in and week out that nurture our spirits. In closing, I'd like to encourage any of you who are so inclined, here comes the commercial, to join us in the choir and add your talent to keeping the UU-CGL musical tradition alive. To quote Roberta Flack, the African-American singer, songwriter, and Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award winner, great music leaves a lasting impression on the soul, a mark that can never be erased. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. There are many things I could say about why I give to this church and what belonging to this church community means to me. But here's what I will say this morning. The motto of the college I attended, Hampshire College, is non satis scire. Beautiful. That's great. I understand that in part to mean it's not enough to know. You must take action. Belonging to this church community helps me put my beliefs into action. I've belonged to this community for well over 20 years, and like Jim and Trudy, it has meant different things to me at different phases in my life. Recently, it's meant being on the team that installed and now tends the native plant garden in front of the church. And it also recently means something as simple as slapping together peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and meals for my brother's table. Belonging to this church community gives me joy. Giving to the church gives me joy, and is one of the ways I put my faith into action. I got a little ticked off with Francine for asking me to do this because I knew I would cry no matter what I said. Okay. I would also say giving to the church is very easy. I have an auto pay set up at my bank account. I do it once, and then my contributions just go out monthly. So I just wanted to mention that as a little bit of an aside. It gives me great joy to sing with the choir. While it is often nerve-wracking for me, I know I can watch our beloved Kenneth like a hawk, and with his guidance, I'll come in at the right time. It's a great feeling to know I can count on him. I can listen to my singing buddy at my side, Linda, and when I flounder or worry about, is that the right note? I can listen to her and do my best to match whatever she's doing, and I'll be good. So it's great knowing I can count on her. Despite my many efforts, I find it's a challenge to put into words the joy and experience of singing in community. But in short, I have found a home here, a world to belong to. At times in the last few years, as I have adjusted to suddenly and unexpectedly, I rewrote this so many times, and I tried to get it so I wouldn't cry. Anyway, okay, so I unexpectedly left a career I loved and entered a new phase of my life. I felt sad and lonely, lost and adrift. But this community reached out to me saying, if you need a world to belong to, look around, you're already home. And what you seek, you've already found. I can't believe this is on live streaming and I'm doing this. Okay. Let's see. If you need a world to belong to, look around, you're already home. And what you seek, you've already found. Turn around to me, you will see no reason to be lonely.
In his book, Love and Rage, Lama Rod Owens, a queer black teacher of the Tibetan Buddhist lineage, speaking from his activist background, as well as his spiritual practice, asks, how can we metabolize our anger into a force for liberation? He writes, quote, the great activism needed today entails bridging our personal grieving with the grieving of our communities. Our anger arises over our pain and is only pointing back to our pain. To hold space for our pain is the way that we begin to take care of our pain. Taking care of our pain softens our hurt as we do the work of empathizing with others. Empathizing with others makes it easier to empathizing with ourselves, makes it easier to empathize with others around us. And this empathy is at the root of the love and compassion that will begin to disrupt the systems that create harm. If we refuse to acknowledge our hurt, we will never understand how to relate to our anger in such a way that we are not reacting to it. If we're always just reacting to our anger, we will never be fully empowered in our agency to channel the energy of anger into clarity and directness while reducing harm. I want to see a culture of activism where we can celebrate our anger and rage while realizing that they are not the issue. Our anger and rage are not the reason why we in the world are struggling. We in the world struggle because we have misused our anger by reacting to it instead of partnering with the energy of anger to address the roots of why we hurt. I have had to learn to love my anger, to treat it as I would treat anyone or anything that I consider precious and beautiful. My anger is my precious and beautiful thing. And it was because of this new relationship that my anger was no longer something that controlled me. Here ends the reading.
So when we first started rehearsing this piece that we're going to do, there was a little bit of a kerfuffle in the group. Some of us weren't sure about the words, how we felt about them, and we decided to share a little bit of that with you. And we've come to, a peaceful resolution, I think. But the phrase that caught me in a negative way, I think, at first was, if there is harmony in the home, there will be order in the nation. And I thought, oh, okay, so it's our fault. There's not enough harmony in the home, so that's why everything's going, why there's no order in the nation. And it brought up an image for me of, the 50s, father knows best, children should be seen but not heard. You're sitting at the dinner table. I grew up in the 50s, and there were many good things about it, but it wasn't all that, I'll tell you. It's better now. But that was just my initial knee-jerk reaction to one phrase. But the text as a whole doesn't say that. And the way I have come to think of it now is the text as a whole, which Liz is going to talk more about, encourages us to be mindful of the fact that what is within us radiates outward. And I don't think that it's saying, and I wrote this down before I heard your reading, I don't think that it's saying that we should restrict or inhibit our anger or our fear, but rather that acceptance of all that arises within us leads to a more stable form of harmony that will radiate outward and will make things better. And when you listen to the music, there's a lot of clashing notes. And if you don't fight them, if you lean into them, as Kenneth urges us to do, it resolves into a peaceful harmony. So that was my journey with this piece.
Hello, I'm Liz, and I'm going to read you the Scottish blessing that this piece is based on first, and then just say a couple words about how I interpreted it. If there is courage in the heart, there will be beauty in the soul. If there is beauty in the soul, there will be harmony in the home. If there is harmony in the home, there will be order in the nation. If there is order in the nation, there will be peace in the world. So let it be. When we first rehearsed the song, I loved the sentiment that everything is interdependent. What is in our hearts influences our home, and harmony at home has an effect on society. Order in the nation means security and stability in this old Scottish blessing, and is a desirable state. When people behave in accordance with norms and acceptable behaviors toward other, based on toward each other based on righteousness and harmony, then there is predictability, which leads to security and peace. In a world which often seems chaotic and dangerous, this form of order is a comfort.
As events were leading up to World War II, Reinhold Niebuhr, an American-German theologian, was formulating a prayer. Some of you may know this prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. The Serenity Prayer, which has traveled the world and was popularized in this country by its use in Alcoholics Anonymous and other recovery groups, was given in a sermon at a small congregation in Heath, Massachusetts by Niebuhr, and was included in the 1944 Book of Prayers and Services for the Armed Forces. As Hitler consolidated power in 1933, Niebuhr published articles analyzing the emerging totalitarian state with remarkable prescience, and he may be among the first observers to apply the term totalitarian to describe the Nazi regime, identifying the elimination of critical voices and the absence of constraints against state power. The prayer emerged while Niebuhr was struggling to understand how to respond here on the other side of the Atlantic. And I'll use it as a grounding point in my remarks and recommend it to you all as a spiritual toolkit these days if you're not already using it. Spirit of love, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. We cannot change the past, right? The past, even the recent past, is set. We are in a moment where the rupture of the post-World War II order is gaining pace, and our country's leaders no longer seek to earn the title of being leaders of the free world. I'm going to tear up on this one too.
Good. I like company.
In extraordinary scenes this past week, the U.S. sided with Russia and North Korea against Ukraine and Europe at the UN, and then attacked the president of Ukraine publicly. Violence has been legitimated and greed has been praised from the highest levels of government. Here at UUCGL, we have been holding weekly Zoom meetings to discuss and share resources for action concerning all this, which you are invited to join. And the title for the gathering comes from Timothy Snyder's short and effective book on tyranny. In the prologue to this book, Snyder writes, quote, "The founding fathers of our country sought to avoid the evil that they, like the ancient philosophers, called tyranny. They had in mind the usurpation of power by a single individual or group, or the circumvention of law by rulers for their own benefit." Now, the grounding text of today, the Serenity Prayer, it invites us to begin with accepting reality as a starting point in discerning how to move forward and how to act. And so this is why I begin with this. We are indeed witnessing moves to consolidate power and circumvent the rule of law in this country. Goddess, Spirit of the earth, Spirit of life, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Of course, this grab for power is not a new thing to our world. It's very old. And just as old are those traditions of resistance to that usurpation of power. There is wisdom in these traditions. Histories dating back to some of the earliest records we have of human societies, and I've been diving into them, some of which developed ways to prevent the rise of authoritarianism and some of which didn't. In our own country's history, lest we forget, indigenous and black movements have been resisting and organizing against the forces of imperialism and colonization for hundreds of years. And as Unitarian Universalists, we also belong to such a tradition. And together with all people of conscience, it is our calling to resist. The current president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, Reverend Dr. Sophia Betancourt, recently wrote, "Faithful dissent is our theological inheritance. Today's Unitarian Universalism emerges from a heritage of dissenting churches that is hundreds of years old, and we must continue our theological tradition of dissent." So many of us have been feeling a whole range of challenging emotions right now, from fear and anxiety to grief and sadness to anger and rage. Stomach pain, physical symptoms. And while the whole range of emotions must, of course, be accepted and acknowledged and moved through, I do want to focus on anger today in particular. Because anger is important right now. As we heard from the Buddhist teacher, or Lama, Rod Owens, in our reading, it is his precious and beautiful thing. If we refuse to acknowledge our hurt, we will never understand how to relate to our anger in the way that we are not reacting to it. And if we are always just reacting to our anger, we will never be fully empowered in our agency to channel the energy of anger into clarity and directness while reducing harm. It's a great line. That's what I want us all to do. To do what we must internally, both individually and collectively, to become fully empowered in our agency to channel the energy of anger into clarity and directness, to resist and to reduce harm. During the last 3 years or so, I've been working with my anger, even with my practices, long-term practices of meditation and mindfulness, which encourage identifying, accepting, feeling your emotions. I was having trouble acknowledging my anger. It was just too big. In fact, since I had basically tried to ignore it my whole life, I discovered it was building up in my body, in my emotional system, underneath the surface. Here I was, someone committed to nonviolence, but since I had really misunderstood and believed that even to experience my anger, to really own it and embody the emotion would itself be damaging, I was harboring anger unintentionally. Anger is a tricky emotion. Unprocessed anger, I believe, is destructive and harmful to ourselves and others. It can leave some people vulnerable to demagoguery. It can lead to violence. Well, it's not evil in itself. Evil uses anger destructively. And there are different ways that anger leads to harm when we let it build up within ourselves. Mechanically, our emotional system, I believe, is looking for ways to release the anger. In my case, I'd say it came out mostly passively aggressively, which is where the anger sneaks in and causes harm while attempting to stay hidden, sometimes even from the perpetrator. Self-awareness practices, which I'm a big fan of, help to mitigate the harm here. Two other ways I'll just mention that anger buildup can play out in the emotional system are through self-directed anger, which is also popular in our culture. And I certainly experienced that to some extent. In the extreme, self-directed anger becomes self-loathing and can collapse into feelings of worthlessness and shame, making its way through our defenses in moments of weakness. Self-love and self-compassion meditation practices, which I do and teach as part of our Sunday evening meditations, are good antidotes to this. The other way anger builds up that anger buildup plays out in our culture is through explosions of anger on others, which we've been witnessing. What I've found is that some people tend to collapse inwardly with their anger, as I did, whereas others collapse outwardly, usually just in short, explosive episodes of anger directed at others, typically short because people are trying to be good people. And they have some awareness of the dynamic. But we see this also play out in bullying, where they no longer necessarily want to be good all the time to all people. In bullying, the explosive anger tends to target the vulnerable and the weak as the easier targets. And we're seeing this play out in the political arena for sure. What I didn't understand before the work I started in with anger release is that the emotional system mechanically will need to find a way to release the anger, as well as all our other emotions. And so if we don't, if I, as I didn't, actively and directly deal with our emotions, they'll find a way to express the three that I just mentioned: passive aggression, self-directed anger, and small bouts of explosive anger are three it will find a way out, identifying the path of least resistance like water flowing out. It will find a way through our psychological defenses as it can in short spurts or through other emotions even, based on the unique psychological strengths and weaknesses of each individual. Goddess, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. The steps to the anger release work that I did begin with the first part of the Serenity Prayer, which is coming to accept and own my own anger. Honestly, even after reading about the emotional healing work that I intended to do, it took me quite a long time to really own and acknowledge I needed to do this. And part of that is once you own and acknowledge it, with that acceptance, it naturally leads you to, of course, face that you have to do something about it, right? And so it leads into this second part of the prayer, building up the courage to change. Acknowledging a problem with loving intentions to heal naturally starts to lead to developing courage to face it. And it's my hope that as we come together and acknowledge the political reality that we're facing in our country right now, with all the challenging emotions that this brings up for us, that we begin to develop the courage together to face that reality. In his book on tyranny, Timothy Snyder writes, "To abandon facts," this came up earlier, "to abandon facts is to abandon freedom. If nothing is true, then no one can criticize power because there is no basis upon which to do so. If nothing is true, then all is spectacle. The biggest wallet pays for the most blinding lights." End quote. Open hostility to verifiable reality. This is both a sign of an unhealthy anger drive, and politically, it's a path towards authoritarianism. And while some people, my past self included, would prefer to suppress our anger rather than take it out on others, that is not the direction that the leadership of our country is taking anger right now, unfortunately. Last week, we had a wonderful guest speaker at the pulpit, Colette Lima from our social justice partner, Essex County Community Organizing. Martha organized for us as well. And she spoke about the importance of organizing in this moment, which we've talked about today already, both as a means of resistance and change, as well as for resilience and mutual aid. She spoke to the history of the Black organizing tradition, and one of the threads in her remarks that I want to pick up on this morning was the importance of songs. The African American spirituals in particular, such as the song we opened with this morning. Her remarks reminded me of the words from our reading by Lama Rod Owens, and that singing songs together, such as these in worship, is indeed one way that we can channel our energy of anger into clarity of vision and action together. And it helps to process some of that raw emotion of anger, I believe, to reduce harm by speaking and singing to the realities we face together that should make us angry. So that's some good news. Here's some more good news. When in its balanced state, I believe anger is transformed simply into care, into the energy of love working towards standing up for ourselves and those we care about. It is love. In the words of the theologian Cornel West, never forget that justice is what love looks like in public. And it is this justice-seeking and righteous dimension of love that we can cultivate through working with our anger, and that is so important for us to connect with and nurture at this time. For those of us who might struggle with even feeling a right to feel angry and get mad, which included me, I just want to say it's so important, I think, to reclaim our healthy emotional fire drive. It's so important to our work for justice because it's an important aspect of claiming our power. Our emotional fire is our primary driver, I've come to believe, which means when we disconnect from it and we lose it, which can happen, we don't have a lot to give under pressure. And right now, there's a lot of pressure being exerted on us. So it's very important we reclaim our fire, to speak truth, to demand justice, to fight for our values, for some of us to fight for the right to exist. We need a good amount of fire. In my own journey, I slowly learned that by actively working out my anger in private, in ways that didn't hurt anyone or anything, that's the key here. For example, chopping dead wood, not even cutting down a tree that's alive, it's already dead. Shouting in private where nobody can hear. Going for a run, releasing my anger through the run. I was releasing this, really it's like a toxin in the body. It was my experience, that anger and rage. And that is actually how somatic healing and trauma healing work are coming to see this as well. And when the toxic element, which seeks to destroy and harm, that's part of it, when that's released, I did find my primary drive and energy of care, the same drive needed to fight for what we care about, to protect and defend what we love, this grew stronger. In the words of past president of the UUA, Reverend William Sinkford, we are a gentle and generous people, but let us not forget our anger. May it fuel not only our commitment to compassion, but also our commitment to make fundamental changes. Our vision of the beloved community must stand against a vision that would allow the privilege of the few to be accepted as just and even holy. Our religious vision must ask again and again, who is my neighbor? And strive always to include more and more of us. As we intone the words that gave birth to this nation, we the people, we are and we should be both a gentle and an angry people. End quote. Healthy anger creates the drive that we need now to resist, to speak out against harm, to protect ourselves and others, to demand that justice and the rule of law be followed. So here's a version of the Serenity Prayer unique to this need. God, may we have the serenity to accept our anger, the courage to transform it into a force for good, to use it collectively to resist, and the wisdom to know how to do this. We can do this together. Amen.